I hear sound-ish.
Oh, okay. Let me move then, because I might be in a bad spot.
Blessing and godsend that you're here. So
I don't have any connectivity in my room, sorry. So you gotta keep it down. Okay.
you shared, you were so real and honest. You shared the story about one of your veteran friends and losing one of your
Oh yeah.
veteran friends. Yeah. So I've spent so 2019, yes, was the last time. And then I went to get my health sciences degree, which is where I developed this presentation. So what I want to do, and just including allowing like free speak, is I want to go through this because I want to know how the I am for transition lands with you or lack thereof. Didn't you used to jump out of planes?
I did. Yeah.
You were a paratrooper?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
You get it. 100% so far.
Yeah. Okay. Andrew Nelson, also known as Andy Nelson, now on all of your email signatures and your Facebook. And yes, but that's the logo. So ever since I started advocating for an addition to the transition wellness for our vet community, it was always with emphasis on having an aspect that is more experiential, more engaging, less speaker to listener, more getting some wheels spinning so that there's a developed sense of self from the outset before taking off those boots for the very last time. What did you do with your boots? Did you turn them in? Did you keep them? Did you give them to Goodwill?
Oh, well, everybody's got more than one pair, let's put it that way. So,
Okay.
um, I still have my paratrooper boots, my dress boots. I still have them. They're just in the garage. And I think actually, if you look at my Instagram, I took a picture with them at some point. So I have a post.
Okay, because do you venture beyond trademarking?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, what I do is kind of it's basically I would say two large buckets. One is kind of the intellectual property side in terms of counseling and helping secure or perfect those rights, and that ends up being trademarked, copyright. I touch a little bit of patents, but I'm not a patent attorney specifically, so I refer that out if it gets too far down that road. Trade secrets, you've heard of those as well, like Colonel Sanders, recipe, that sort of thing. The other side that I've always done since day one is what you might see on TV, as in dispute resolution, business, litigation, lawsuits, that sort of thing. And that runs the gamut. There's certainly intellectual property disputes that I deal with, but it's much broader than that. Contractual. Most things are contractual. Some kind of agreement, some kind of set of promises back and forth that didn't go right.
And full disclosure, there's some slides that I gave, like anyone presenting this, for instance, if this were to be supplemented as a course of study, an area of learning engagement, in the event that that happens, any facilitator of wellness who's trusted and vouched for and welcomed throughout the lifeline of the bases could do this same thing, just supplementing their own personal story. For an example, for each of the 5 identity associations. So there's 5 different ones that I've at least pegged for now. I'm going to share this with more mental health professionals in the vein of therapists, psychologists, psychiatrists. And if there was some sort of, oh my goodness, you massively missed an angle, I am always 100% open, because that's learning. Like if you don't do it, someone else will. You publish a book and then someone reads it and they go, oh, this is great. And there's like this next level that I wouldn't have gotten to. We wouldn't have gotten to if it weren't for this body of work, but this body of work needed to come. So I just see it as constantly growing. And that's, again, like why I completely got you all over your social media. Was like, please come in today. And yeah. Anything, any comment. And I want you to interject like anytime, just knowing that like I'm here at this table for up to, for 90 minutes. Like, so If we need to kind of move through it quickly, then I'd say let's coast through it. If there's like a question, it makes it all the richer. So if you have a question, enrich us. Okay. But in the meantime, thank you for lending your presence, your voice, and your bandwidth.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. This is you. This is your slide.
Okay.
You read it.
Well, I'm ready. You want me to read this?
We're going to take turns just because I don't want you to fall asleep.
Okay. So do I say, is it I am or is it I am?
Whatever you want. I say I am.
I am Identity Association Model.
Yes, sir. So it's the interrelationship, long drawn out title of identities and practical application for American military service members. Some people just say my, some people I notice because you are my number 6% to do this with me, just say Joe. So it's whatever you, and it is that, it's kind of blending in that lighter gray.
Yeah, and I'm at the age now where I have to put on these.
Well, I have my glasses right here. I just thought that it created a weird glare and it might make it look weird. Does it look like weird glare on the camera now? Screw it. I'll wear it with you.
No, not at all. So you want me to read here?
Yes, sir. You take turns with me.
Okay, so my military support initiatives. In 2016, I founded my own 501c3 in support of military service members transition. You want to keep going? Okay. From 2017 to 2021, did interviews with people from all military branches asking for information on how their transition experience to civilian was. In spring of 2020, I did a free weekly virtual meeting called Warrior Prone for select veterans and active duty to talk amongst themselves on the topic of wellness for 6 weeks. In May of 2020, I offered a free to military 12-week trauma cooperative yoga teacher training where all participants successfully graduated. In August 2020, I was the sole recipient of the Priscilla Backman Scholarship for Activism in regards to my military transition wellness work. In November 2021, I published my trauma resolution book with the last chapter dedicated to our warriors in uniform in order to bring awareness to their worthiness of extended support. From 2022 to 2023, I developed this IAM for Transition 3-hour workshop and its book.
Thank you so much, Andy. I promise they're not all that long. I got a shorter one, and I can always allocate the longer ones to myself too.
Okay.
But this just says that, you know, what's my relationship to this work? I did leave one thing out that we see here. So there's the fact that I am a former naval spouse, daughter of a World War II veteran who never sought help for his post-traumatic stress. They called it shell shock back then because only until 1980 did psychologists and psychiatrists deem that it would be called PTS and then adding a D on the end. A lot of people in the military environment now rightfully recognize that being affected by life is supernatural. Two different words, super and natural. So my grandmother worked for more than a decade as the head of office operations for Alan Shepard. So that big guy in space, and her husband internationally was a security systems analyst at Air Force bases. And my grandmother's brother was a former naval captain who translated for JFK on more than one occasion. The 501c3 that Andy mentioned, and then just having the relationship really neighbor, friend, advocate. I should also put writing coach because in 2012, it first came to my attention through someone hiring me, working with them for a couple hours each week by phone, and then their girlfriend to help them write their memoirs. And he was a former first sergeant in the Army who had gotten off of 37 months total of combat time, born and raised in Costa Rica. So where they don't even have a military presence, to studying before he was, I've never been to Costa Rica, have you?
I have. I want a few.
You have, I have my Pura Vida bracelet on. It's a gold.
Oh, very
Goals.
cool.
Um,
Very cool.
yeah, and like, so he just like had this, he had studied history. And he had studied, oddly enough, Mosul. So when he got to Mosul and he had to play on the opposite, team, if you will, it was in some respect, from what I got from it, somewhat of a challenge for him in a spiritual way, which former Command Sergeant Major Donald McAllister, I call him Mac, he also has done this last week, I think, or the week before. And he brought to the table a discussion around that very normal, if you will, experience of having this kind of split self, which I hate saying that because the whole, like, if I were to say Urban Dictionary of this workshop, never mind interrelationship of identities and their practical application for American service members, I'd call it, and I'm calling it unifying you. So that's the intent, is like kind of connecting our pieces, moving forward. Your turn.
Okay. What this work and today is about. We will learn a self-guided resource that can be accessed by all American transitioning military. Today, we learn to build an effective self-relationship to locate ourselves in difficult moments, to remember who we are and want to become moment to moment. This work is created with intent to reduce and or stop possible self-harm and suicides.
So imagine being at the front of the room, and this is before doing this, having everyone in their camis, camouflaged, and asking everyone to get a study buddy, setting a timer, talking amongst themselves, because they were all in different units, platoons, whatever the word is that they use in their command. And when you discharge, it's usually people from all these different places thrown into a room together. And some of them have never met. What an opportunity to get a study buddy, to encourage dialogue and exchange numbers, and at least for the duration of 2 to 3 hours, having a workshop. Okay, this is you.
Military suicide statistics.
Oh, it's me. Just because I was speaking doesn't mean that I get to pass. Sorry. Yes, so this basically says, as according to Brown University, New England, right? I saw the campus once. It's gorgeous.
Yeah.
That there are 4 times, at least, so look at those words, at least 4 times as many veterans, not a happy occasion, dying not by international conflict, not by battle experience, but by self-inflicted harm. So 4 times, at least 4 times as many people dying by self-inflicted harm versus dying actually on a battlefield.
So back to me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thanks. Researchers say causes for self-harm and suicide include lower level of education, loss of close peers, military structure, unhealed brain head traumas, life-lasting physical injuries yet to be mindfully or skillfully navigated.
And this is of no reflection to Andy Nelson's beliefs or views of what might be causing any possible self-harm, whether the statistics are true or not, that have been documented by multiple academic sources. This is of no reflection to you, that you're here on the good graces of honoring that. Last time our interview got cut short, but we had a pretty great interview, not 2019, when I was picking the brains of doing this experiential research that I found myself calling it, and didn't really know exactly what to call it then, but definitely have found that is a great way to pinpoint it. Do we have a personal professional integration? I hear a voice. Do you need to be dad for a second?
Oh. Kel, you got to keep it down, please.
Oh, okay. So she doesn't need dad. So we can all take a back seat in our nurturing skills for them. Well, we get to bring them here. We get to bring them here. Okay, is this, wait, you, no. Yeah, no, me, goodness gracious.
Okay.
That's the thing about having all these interjections. After 5 years of my interviewing American service members from all military branches, via Zoom, via the blessed disposition of people going, she seems kind of quirky or a little strange. I wonder I'll meet with her. No, okay. But I don't know why people agreed to talk with me. But I think there's some sort of mutual respect in that, for the topic. So self aside for the topic. But after 5 years of interviewing American service members from all military branches, so 2017, 18, 19, 2000, 2021, last one being with Brandy Benson, who with, I think, Hunter 7, finally got something pushed through with Washington, D.C., got to go to the White House and everything for her burn pit environmental concerns. But I began to realize how important developing, here it is, a sense of agency over oneself. So all service members, in order to combat the disconnection from self that many military service members that I noticed in those 5 years of interviews oftentimes encounter. And since then, I've learned that psychologists have often noted such disconnection is the very definition of trauma itself. It makes sense to me, and from personal experience, and we'll get to my personal examples, disconnection from self. And I even use like a comical example. I laugh at it every time I read about it. It's fun. We'll get to it.
That's where the vital nature of the IAM comes into play. The identity association model is the primary tool in this workshop to support a possibility for greater ease for all transitioning service members. Having a continuity of structure and the immediate use of tools makes all the difference in how well one transitions from one major station in life to the next.
Any questions, any gaps, holes in that you're like, not sold on? I need to know.
No, not as of yet.
Okay, over and out. Some challenges facing service years can be sleeplessness. Oh my goodness. I keep seeing all these studies on how much we need sleep. Lack of privacy and personal space. Yes, I missed one night, and you know that I'm all of my 40 years of life, because one night and I felt like I was like Dorothy and what's that Kansas Take Me Home thing? What's I wasn't here. I wasn't in my body after missing.
This isn't Kansas anymore. This isn't Kansas anymore. And there's no place like home.
Exactly. Home being this self that has some cohesiveness inwardly. Okay, loss of definite geographic plans. That was difficult for me as a naval spouse. Personal restlessness. Hurry up and wait.
Oh yeah.
So always having this this sense of urgency around, and we get there, structure, formalities, courtesies, and menial tasks, and that hypervigilance, which can create that sense of restlessness. I like to convert hypervigilance to hyper-awareness, because if we just turn the switch on our central nervous system, well, the autonomic nervous system, excuse me, so from that fight and flight to rest and digest. Fight and flight's great. It's not an enemy. Just like the 5 identity associations, not one is better than another when we get there. But isolation, I mean, yes, there's a lot of camaraderie oftentimes between peers and mates. And yet there's that lack of agency where I can say, you know what, I think I need to take a day. There's leave time, yes. However, if you're deployed, that's a little more challenging. Extreme levels of secrecy leading to trust issues. I have had service members, I remember my ex-boyfriend was a surfer in Hawaii, and we had this specific service member working on my car, and he wanted to come and eat dinner with us. He completely signed up for it. He wouldn't drink from like the glass. Like there's such a level of fear. Wow. I hired a service member in Stafford, Virginia, also would not drink from glass. it's like, I mean, plus there is, and to speak to suspicions. A lot of people in that time, in those times of interviewing service members, wondered why I might give a damn. Especially because that's before I had my health sciences degree, but I had been working in wellness since I was 21.
Mhm.
You know, and I started this, I must have been 35, yeah, at the time. No, 33, 30, anyway, so it was my realm of interest. Anyway, moving forward, onward.
We're at me, are we? Transition challenges. Great levels of uncertainty, hyper reliance on outside orders, ability to take initiative on one's own due to sudden orderlessness, lack of cohesiveness of purpose as one's actions now drastically change in the day-to-day, the lack of knowing the why when enacting orders throughout the years can create foundation for a lack of necessary self-inquiry before action taking. Loss of daily support network and companionship with peers. Difficulty connecting with normal civilians due to feelings of alienation.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Anything stand out more than the other ones, or any questions, curiosities?
Ah, boy. I think that the ingredients can vary in that soup for each individual, but I don't know if anyone sticks. I don't know if one of those is pervasive amongst everybody.
What am I missing?
I think it's kind of a unique. No, I think it's just kind of a unique soup, a unique combination of those things to every single person.
Right.
Example, with me, I knew what I was doing when I got out, and I'm not the only one who knew what he was doing. I mean, I knew I was starting college 1 week later, once I got out.
Wow.
But
That's amazing, Andy, because that's it. I mean, we are a byproduct of our environment. Those neural nets are endlessly capable of rerouting and clustering in new ways. Do our minds sometimes revisit the old clusters? Absolutely, especially if there's a reminder.
yeah.
Okay, cool. Okay, what's next for today? Learning the 5 identity associations, definitions, how to relate to them, and practical exercises. Hopefully we get to the exercise part, but if not, we are still breaking ground here.
Okay. It's me, surface identity. This identity association relates to the external world and our relationship to it at large. For example, service member, teacher, provider, visionary, mechanic, engineer, mother, father, sister, brother, breadwinner, dependent, etc. The aspect of identity helps one to function within one's crafted existence in this world through acceptance of what is. Although rarely to never is the totality of who someone is as a whole person or is to become.
Which we can forget. We can kind of overfavor aspects of ourselves that maybe just like are easy to go with the current. When you break it down again, so there's a bit of reiteration here, relates to the external world, surface identity, and our relationship to it, although rarely to never is the totality of who someone is.
Right. Simple speak, how we relate to the world by way of our chosen or assigned roles and titles.
Yes. So technically, on the surface at least, I'm a high school dropout who earned my GED. But if I had believed that's all I was, then I wouldn't have become a Harvard faculty club speaker 15 years later, gotten accepted into a world-renowned school in acting, which the reason why I did was because the owner of the modeling agency in Miami, where my mom had moved us to in the middle of sophomore year, wanted to date me. And I thought my mom was kidding. I thought the Stargazer lilies were just 12 dozen Stargazer lilies that came to the door. It was just a nice gesture. But I didn't understand And when I did, I was being a sweet girl, said, you know, I'd love being friends with you, to this guy, Jerry, whoever his name was. And I never got a job again because I didn't want to date this guy. So I looked back and I thought, how can I continue to move forward? Like, I wanted to do something big and different. And okay, I remember one thing that he said as he was teaching all of us how to pose for photos, that he had always wanted to go to Lee Strasberg Theater Institute, where Pacino and Scarlett Johansson and others went. And I made it my life mission. I recruited neighbors, like I recruited Anna today to do this with me. I made it my life mission. We wrote an amazing, I wrote it, she helped me with my grammar, well, actually a Navy veteran. So ironically enough, helped me to write and make sure it was written well before sending it to Michelle up in the office in New York City. University of British Columbia endorsed student. Thank you to Paul Belserine, my teacher in creative writing at the University of British Columbia. He helped me get a $43,000 Dean Scholarship to the University of Denver that I start in fall of 2024.
Exciting.
Yeah. And stuff like that, you know, so stuff like that. We started off going, you know, life deals us these cards. Some things are beyond us. We only have so much control. And then we have control over what we have control over. So, okay.
The bright side. Bright side in areas for potential alarm. Certainty, belonging, the courage to be who we are, or at least what we think we are. Self-deception, self-doubt, self-sabotage, restrictive righteousness. Ooh, what's that?
Well, when we over-identify so much, so heartily with one principle or idea or aspect of self, that there's no room edgewise to see and interpret new aspects of self and or the world. Tracking, okay. Transgressional identity. Number 2. This one is the one we regress toward in order to please a former construct of oneself. There's only 5, as is related to one's nuclear family and or original prominent life experiences, such as service years, and is often engaged within the self for the sake of survival. For example, there's a strong we emphasis, which makes our service members amazing candidates to do anything of great service after serving in the military in any position. However, if we forget ourselves and leave ourselves by the wayside, this can be an issue.
Number 2, transgressional identity. The identity association is regressed toward the order to please a former construct of self as is related to one's original upbringing or prominent life experiences.
Thank you. Simple speak, resorting to what is considered most normal or acceptable at the expense of one's self-growth. If I want to make which I did for a long time, I wanted to make my mom happy. I played everything safe. Don't expand too much. Don't challenge the norms. When it came to wanting to get my degree and the talk, the anti-pep talk, you don't need to, you know, the original messages and via email is, you don't, it's expensive. The university is expensive. You know, why? I get it. I get it. In my 20s, I met a girl. She was 38 years of life. And I was like, so what are you doing? She's like, I'm going back to school. And I thought, why would you go back to school? Like, why don't you just like do your life? Like live your life. Like why? And now, isn't it funny, at 40 years of life, here we go. Okay.
Oh boy.
Oh yeah.
I'll read this in the first person, huh? After I divorced my first husband, I jumped in to save him when he fell on hard times. It distracted me from my own life for a short time, made me feel better about myself. Distracted me from my own life, and for a short time made me feel better about myself because I knew someone I cared about, although was untimely not a fit for me. I'm sorry. Although it was
untimely, Andy. It was untimely. Ultimately, it was not a fit for me. Exactly.
Ultimately not a fit for me. Needed support he wasn't getting from anywhere else. Ultimately, I lost my brick and mortar business because I was too busy thinking about how I might care for him.
Since then, I've moved away to accommodate the fresh start I needed while asking his family to take over more and providing them with resources to do so. Rebranded my business, started new exercise regimes that challenged my mental quickness and alertness. So notice this is an all-encompassing interpretation of what it means to take the onus upon myself, to graduate beyond that need for incessant, in this case, people-pleasing is the example of a transgressional identity. It could be any component of self that is resorted to in order to please other people, while leaving oneself out of the picture in some capacity. Maybe not all, but maybe there's a key fundamental part that is being. I've regrown my vision for the future, and I even got invited, Andy, to advertise my business at all 80 of the Rockies baseball. So people who don't know what that is, but Rockies home games.
Well, that's awesome.
Go Rocky. I'm excited. I got my tickets for one game. So yeah, that's going to be fun.
Okay. There are times in my life when I've tried to appease people by resorting to being a previous version of myself or placating to people's approved versions of me. For example, being a teenager trying to find myself while also trying to stay in the mold of what I've already learned fashion magazines say is okay. Says is okay. Or being 29 and mirroring the asceticism I learned at the beginning of the decade in the yoga monastery I lived in.
You know, I read more than I speak, so learning how to pronounce asceticism for this was a fun exercise.
Is it that? I wasn't sure. Maybe it's asceticism. No, it's asceticism, right?
With a D, like dove or dog. So asceticism. And you did it. You did it perfect. Okay. It was meant.
All right.
At least it sounded it. Like you fooled us. Okay, okay, full disclosure, there's a photo of me being 15, 29. So 15, I've got my pager.
Okay.
Me at 15 there, doing the fashion mag thing, perfectly flat iron. I'm still like a flat iron, but it's not the all identifying compass of who I am. And 29, being withdrawn from creature comforts and enjoying life and being goofy and silly sometimes. Like my Army pilot friend Maria reminds me to do. And many other, I got silly before I knew Maria. I mean, obviously I did, but people can remind us of this great stuff. Okay, transgression. I'm gonna do this because that was a picture. Bright side, potential areas for alarm in regards to transgressional identity, which we heard the simple speak definition of. Bright side is traditional values oriented, wanting to make others happy, can be easier to fit in. Potential areas of alarm. So it's this dance we do with ourselves where this is almost black and white. We want the brown or the gray zone, however you look at the color spectrums. Complacency, self-neglect, self-sabotage, cowardice, self-betrayal. We know what this is saying. We don't, right? Are we tracking? Questions? No? Okay. All right. Thank you.
Compass number 3, compass identity. This identity association relates to the scope of one's interpretation of the world as it's related to one's spirituality, religion, or personal guiding beliefs, including one's indoctrination, and then how that plays out in each of our lives.
How we shape our personal experience of the world through our religious perspectives, beliefs, or indoctrination. Why does this relate to the military? Because again, we're talking about, remember the challenges we went to in the beginning and the military structure being a possible aspect of never breaking down that military structure, never having that, almost that like father-son or mother-daughter conversation where you go, you know, when I told you the birds and the bees were part of nature, you know, actually it's completely different. It's so breaking down, you know, I was telling you all this stuff in boot camp and we we want you to know that it's okay now. You're entering into a new zone from this is you.
From my yoga practice, I thought that living an ascetic, or as an ascetic, or is it ascetic?
Ascetic.
Ascetic, was the only way to be pure and humble. I sold my Freelander Land Rover to pay for my official yoga teacher training and lived without a car for 7 years. I even lived in a monastery at one point, but mostly people's garden suite rentals, aka basement.
You want to come check out the garden suite rental in Vancouver? Be like, oh yeah, let's see. So living as an ascetic, it was for me, the onus was upon my dedicating to living as simply without creature comforts as possible, to have hours and hours every day to meditate and wake up at 4 a.m. And even spending, it led me to writing. So spending 4 hours writing 7 a.m. to 11 a.m. and then going to town and teaching all over vast metropolis of Vancouver, Canada for 7-8 hours while taking public transit. So you're talking, you're talking a nightmare as far as like the length of time it takes you to get to and from work. How long is your commute to work in Southern California?
I take the toll road. I live very close to
Express. I hear that it's happy making. The closer we live to work, the happier we are, says a study.
For sure. I mean, these days I do, probably on average, I do 2 days a week, just up in the loft where the kids are right now.
Oh, sweet.
I have an office up there, and it's just, I can do what I do remotely for the most part. So I take advantage when I can. There's not a lot of reason for me to be in an office, but sometimes you want to get away from home. So if I go there, I can jump on the toll road right here if I feel like paying for it that day, and I can be there in about 12, 13 minutes. If I don't want to pay for that,
nice.
It's going to be a good half an hour.
So presencing in personal spaces, I'm just going to turn off the oven because I thought I put the tea on low enough of a notch that it wouldn't bubble. I can hear it bubbling, and if it bubbles too long, I'm going to burn the pot. 1 second.
Okay.
Hallelujah, just in time. Just in time. So that's an example from personal life. It could be any example. Do we need to pause?
Nope.
Nope. But I've learned that I cannot identify with the consciousness in relationship to compass identity, number 3 of 5. I've learned that I cannot identify with the construct of a world largely uncreated by me and then expect to know who I am or become who I want to be. So again, this is speaking to the self-agency around determining our own personal narratives and the very much need to cultivate said narratives in a mindful way that is instructive and integrative for the benefit of service members.
I cannot overly identify with labels and practices uncreated by me and then expect to fulfill my fullest potential.
As a whole, we cannot identify with and act within roles undreamt by us and then expect to fill our shoes day in and day out in a way that feels good to us.
Since then, I've anchored into my worthiness to live a full life, or at least what that means to me. I've allowed myself to be in deeply committed relationships without feeling ashamed for my attachment to the people I love. I've leased a nice car that I feel safe in. I've rewarded my life's efforts with nice belongings I feel comfortable and fresh in.
So parallel yoga life, monastic living, as I had a stint in, and barracks, military life, there's a certain level of asceticism, renouncement of all. I mean, no kidding. Yours more extreme than mine. Yours, you give your wallet, your hair, your
I remember. Yeah. I remember that very first, well, the second day in particular. I had such culture shock because one day, I mean, you're kind of rolling in and into a new environment, but you still have your appearance and your at least your personal belongings and creature comforts, your clothing. But once that gets stripped from you and your hair gets shaved off and you lose every connection with the world that you knew, I remember I was shaking on day 2. Literally
And
shaking.
put in a locker, all those personal things, put in a locker where you don't know where the locker is. It's like a psychological
Yeah.
shift.
Yeah.
Enormous, because for me, I feel comfortable by knowing where my things are. But there's that sense of uncertainty, which I've studied with
Mhm.
some business people, and whether used for light and love or used for challenging where one's natural disposition is and turning that around for one's own personal gain, whatever the situation is. The FUD acronym, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And that's the best way to really get someone to do as is told, which is a beautiful thing in getting people to work in cadence with one another in the military. However, without a sense of wherewithal of finding oneself, referencing oneself at any given moment, it can be a challenge to recover those parts of self that were blindsided and left shaking due to the impact of having such uncertainty, fear, uncertainty, doubt. Compass identity, the bright side and potential areas of alarm. Now, whenever someone's reading this, Andy, they usually say harm. Do you think it should read harm? I like the word alarm because
Well, yeah, I've got I mean, my brain is pointing me toward harm. It's pointing me to
HARM.
HARM.
Okay, well, if people are thinking it anyway, then maybe just let people think that anyway. And then,
I mean, should you be concerned? I mean, potential alarm, potential harm.
Yeah, no, I'm flexible. If it ever becomes a point of contention and this is to be pushed through some way, somehow, sometime.
Mhm.
All right, compass identity. So as it pertains to the simple speak, we've spoken about this for the last several minutes now. And the lieutenant colonel suggested taking 30 minutes per identity association. So 30 minutes for compass, 30 minutes for transgressional, 30 minutes for surface, 30 minutes for the next 2. And just taking time and making that the workshop. And then having the rest of the writing like printed where they can read it like with a study buddy or something. Because like this is just so in depth and they deserve like, and also scientifically, our brains need like 45 minutes as a break, like every 45 minutes. Hence why adding in these personal insertions of story and narrative breaks that steady stream of focus on one topic. So if we add in the personal narratives, then it's like your brain gets to take a little vacay, and then you're back on, you're sharper than ever, you're integrating the information that's before us like that. Anyway, okay, let's get to the slide.
I wish I would have learned about Pomodoros a long time ago.
Oh, what's Pomodoro? What is Pomodoro? Oh my God, do I sound dumb or what? What's a Pomodoro?
Well, I mean, you know, I guess that it's a tomato, but the Pomodoro, you know, the Pomodoro method of studying or focusing for work is something that I come to adopt, not in the whole,
cool.
Not fully. Pardon?
Cool. I know it's Pomodoro. So what is it? That's how we spell it, guys, right?
Yeah, Pomodoro. So, I mean, it really relates back to a guy who created, I think in the 80s, from an actual like kitchen timer that was shaped like a tomato, a Pomodoro. So that, but I think fundamentally the way it was created was it starts out, it's a way of hyper focusing on work or studying. Basically, meaning you take 20 minutes with I think it's 5-minute breaks. 20 minutes with 5-minute break, 20 minute, 5-minute, 20 minute, 5-minute for I think up to 3 hours. And then you can have a much more loosey-goosey, flexible, squishy kind of time after that.
Like 45, 15.
Yeah, but and then some people, instead of doing 25, will do 50 10s. You know, sometimes I have to do 50 10s. But I have noticed when I adopt that, oh yeah, I can really crank it on.
Zoom through the day. Like otherwise it's just, oh my, I mean, that's how
but you really have to
labor and work hard instead of smart.
You got to
way better.
You have to throw all potential distractions away. You got to get rid of your phone.
Yeah.
You've got to get rid of just other stuff. I mean, and it works. Like anybody can, even me, who probably has some undiagnosed ADD, and I don't say that lightly. I'm not trying to say that.
Yes.
I'm not trying to say that humorously. I'm actually very serious about that.
Me too.
You can really hunker down, and I was surprised at how much I could get done by adopting Pomodoros or whatever. And then there's tons of apps that do it, and you can go to YouTube and there's Pomodoro timers, and I find it to be a very useful thing. I wish somebody would have taught me about a long time ago.
I love it. Thank you. I'm the same way when it comes to physical exercise. So I like to go hard for like 20 minutes and then like take a break. And then 20 minutes. Like literally what I mean by break is go from cardio weights, stretch for 1 minute to 90 seconds, and then go back to intense amount of cardio weights, and then go back to stretching. And it made my ex-boyfriend so mad because to him that was just so like bitch of me. Like not like a gender thing, but like when a guy gets called a bitch or whatever, like that was, I don't know. I'm like, I'm not your equal physically. I don't know. Date a dude. I mean, also I want to feel good. I want maximized regeneration time. So when I leave that full workout with those 3 components of aspects, whether it's with boxing, weights, cardio, and stretching, I want to shorten the amount of reparation time in my physical body. I don't want to ache. And I find that when I do integrate a minute, 60 to 90 seconds of stretching in between the intensities, I feel like a rock star afterward. I'm not like feeling crumbled and I apologize for the word that word was inappropriate. I realize your children are within earshot, and I so apologize.
That close. They're focused.
Last word. That'll be my last time of doing
They're
that.
focused. They're focused.
Okay. But all of this tracks, right? Okay, we're going to move on. But like, I just want to say one of the potential alarms, and I'm not going to read all of them, is just loss of autonomy or resignation. If we're too over-identified with this blueprint of how to do something, that whether we got it from our families, wherever our beliefs stem from, or an organization or institution, then we can't have a sense of resignation. Does that track?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Interwoven identity. 4. Interwoven identity. This identity association is when one's pain and or grief, which is attached to a personal incident, experience, or tragedy, is so defining that the survivor's total way of being is lived from either reactionary or highly responsive state, depending on one's personal sense of agency.
So there we are. No bad identity association. They're all neutral.
Yeah.
This isn't like a make yourself a better person. This is make ourselves manageable to ourselves, which in turn will make us more manageable to the world. Simple speak, living as a result of a challenging event, whether that be negative or positive. Here comes the personal narrative to bring in, and I apologize for the trigger warning also, and I'm going to read it so that you don't need to read the word as I like to say, this is one example. I'm thinking, so the lieutenant colonel, honestly, I guess his daughter, so he had no qualms with this example. It exists. My Air Force neighbor who does marketing for the Air Force as a journalist, he's a journalist with him, but he's ran his like 60 years of life from Alabama, pretty conservative. He completely gets this example. So it's been inoffensive to everyone so far. And that said, there's so many examples. So this is just one, and I'm just one human being. Anyway, you're like, oh my God, what's about to happen? But so this is when my first boyfriend, after my experience of, can your kids hear me? We'll just say assault, said, no one could ever love you again. That's actually, I think, worst thing is those words from someone you trust, right? Like, and trust up until that point. But instead of carrying that grief forward, now remember, we're talking about interwoven now, interwoven. So again, that's living as a result of a negative event and then carrying that forward. Or can I be in transgressional in a respect that I honor, I'm aware those echoes, if you will, of past life experiences, in that as I'm reminded of an event, because we don't turn off, those clusters are always in our brains. And so when we go to a new cluster that's already been there, or an old one, where's the I am coming into play, the identity association model? How do I readapt to an old story in the present moment in a way that's going to anchor me and compel me forward? So you've probably been reading these examples. I'm just going to give one and give like the general gist. In that self-determination, I decided that I wanted to use that pain, that hurt and pain, and turn it into something that was more of a catalyst for me to challenge those words said by said ex-boyfriend. I chose to instill a sense of courage and exploration. I wanted to know, maybe if I put one toe in at a time and I try to be in a relationship with people who I like in that way, that special birds and bees way, maybe I'll be able to be in something that feels good. And it takes time. And this slide simply shows that I have had monumental expressions of love since then. And whereas some people, their goal is to meet one person and, as my girlfriend say, play the game, which basically means mind games. And that's how you get one person to commit to you. And then you're supposed to live happily ever after. How? If you're contorting that valuable aspect of like mental trust and being transparent with each other and being honest about what you're feeling and thinking. Anyway, so yes, I've had several significant relationships, and I truly believe that was something I read on Instagram by some doctor in some post. We are not the success of a relationship is not determined by the length of a relationship. So whether it was a year, 6 months, 4 years, whatever, I have allowed myself to be courageous and challenge that transgressional identity that very much could have, might have been forever instilled in me. There's my dogs and me last year as an exempling of being in a space of someone who I have a platonic friendship with for 22 years. And they're great demonstration of love, because love comes in all different forms, of helping my dogs and me with a jet plane from Hawaii, which is like $100K. It's like a lot of money. And doing something like that once in a lifetime for someone, and then asking them to pick up a piece of their life, of course, is amazing. So this is you.
Okay. With an untrained brain, after the horrid nature of that event, I lived in a reactionary state for quite a bit longer than the momentary visits I now make to reactionary station. For years, I couldn't allow or maintain a physical connection with anyone I liked. And for a decade plus, maintaining an emotional connection felt akin to a life-threatening situation. Eventually, though, gradually, over time, I started to allow people into my life in order to have a chance at dating them.
So I laugh every time I think read that sentence that I wrote about. For a decade plus, maintaining an emotional connection for any length of time felt akin to a life-threatening situation. True story. I laugh because mostly men can probably identify more than women, but women too. Okay, through engaging the identity association model, here we are back to the academic end of this, the philosophical, the psychological, for this self-assessment tool. There's an assimilation of self. Essentially, practicing the I am lengthens our response time by engaging our frontal lobe, a self-dialogue, in a constructive fashion, and therefore shortens that negative reaction time of spiraling out, going to that old cluster map in our brains. We can just do one of each from each column.
Oh, sorry. haven't done one. No. Excuse me.
Getting comfortable.
Interwoven identity areas for potential alarm. You said don't read all of it?
One from each if you want. Just one. It's good.
One for each column?
Yeah.
Possibility to mindfully express. Oh boy. Feeling of being ashamed.
Yeah. Yeah. Because if we believe we are, I mean, any psychologist, therapist can tell you this, and you probably heard before, I hope, you listening to this. If we chalk up who we are based on someone else's actions versus honoring who we are through our own wherewithal and demonstration of our own actions, then it's going to be a dead zone. There's no real good ending from there. Unless you change it, which of course that's the whole point of building new pathways in our brain. Bell Hooks writes in her book, All About Love, echoing the work of Erich Fromm, he defines love as the will to extend one's self for the purpose of nurturing one's own or another's spiritual growth. Yes, this is work even for you and me. When I say that, I mean that if you came from a dysfunctional family, as I identify as just in some respects having the experience as a child, and therefore might feel intimidated or even think oneself unworthy to move beyond what was seen as being modeled, consider this leap in thought by author Bell Hooks. You want to read that part?
With therapeutic help, I was able to see the dysfunctional as a useful description and not as an absolute negative judgment. My family of origin provided throughout my childhood a dysfunctional setting and remains one. This does not mean that it is not also a setting in which affection, delight, and care are present. She goes on to say, if one's goal is self-recovery, to be well in one's soul, honestly and realistically confronting lovelessness is a part of the healing process.
Yes, sir. If love is the will to extend oneself for the purpose of nurturing one's own or another's spiritual growth, then in a wildly unpredictable world, let us learn love by regularly practicing self-recovery through self-management skills.
Bell Hooks writes, we all need spaces where we can be alone with thoughts and feelings, where we can experience healthy psychological autonomy and can choose to share when and if we want to. The I am is a solo work, group work, and or work to be done with a trained mental health professional assigned by the military VA or of your own choice. Remember that many nonprofits have mental health support services free to you, including the All Secure Foundation and the Veterans Crisis Hotline at 1-800-273-8255.
Thank you, sir. It is impossible to nurture one's own or another's spiritual growth if the core of one's being and identity is shrouded in secrecy and lies. So speaking to the point of, in order to engage the self-management tools, self-recovery tools, reconnective modality, I also like to call it, we need to be transparent with ourselves at the very least. Even if you can't tell, I get it. There's been a time in my life where I thought I can't even tell this person who's an assigned mental health person not because it was ghastly, anything that I was thinking or doing. Nothing like that. The fear was around the fact that it was too loaded. It was too much. No one could handle that information. And if that's true for you, at least working with oneself and extending one's own will to oneself to reconstruct a narrative that serves is available.
We often lie if we feel it is unsafe to tell the truth. Removing self-judgment is the foundational work of the identity association model. And believe it or not, we do that by becoming closer in contact with ourselves Without exception, the only way that we may begin to move forward is firstly through ourselves.
I presented this to a lawyer who I used to teach wellness sessions to. Her name's Margaret Grubbs yesterday. And she had such interesting dialogue just around this work and how it interacted with how she needed to be presencing herself in the public eye as a lawyer. So lots of interesting things and dynamics. Mara Glatzel, author of the book Needy. She helps humans stop abandoning themselves, start reclaiming their humanity through embracing their needs.
Book Needy. Your needs matter. The presence of your needs is a fact of your humanity and not a moral failing or flaw revealing your inadequacy. She then says, feeling safe is relative. You're more likely to feel grounded when you navigate your life with an awareness of your inner landscape, an understanding of your social conditioning, and a firmly held desire to stay by your side no matter what life presents. Question is, are you ready to stand by your own side in this I am practice?
The worth and value of your needs are not correlated, to speak to Andy's last read, are not correlated to whether or not someone else has the bandwidth for it. Making the daily choice to care for yourself and not to abandon yourself, no matter how unwieldy or uncomfortable your needs are, is how you set things straight. So no matter if an institution, or a family member or a friend or a loved one in any capacity can meet our need or not, never speaks to our value as a human or our ability to change that.
Mm-hmm. To begin tending to yourself with confidence and compassion, you need to remember and accept that you're both the asker and the provider. You're the vulnerable and the strong.
Ooh, love that. David White, Being at the Frontier of Your Identity Sounds True podcast. In many transplanted Eastern communities like yoga, the whole sense of enlightenment is about creating this fortress sense of self where you know exactly what to do all the time and you're completely perfect. And you've got this spiritual gold medal hung around your neck. As far as I can see, it's the exact opposite. We must move toward proactive unknowing. So the I am model, we go, I don't know what's going on right now. Well, let me look at these identity association definitions that I have here on quick hand. Where am I possibly right now?
Where what?
Where am I possibly right now? If I don't know where I am, if I'm moving toward proactive unknowing, as David White says, which sounds true, in his podcast, Being at the Frontier of Your Identity, with Boulder, it is Boulder located, Boulder, Colorado, then that willingness to engage myself, even if I don't know. That's the whole point. Like, we go and sit with someone because we know that that person, hopefully, is going to be okay with us not knowing and ask thought-provoking questions and be a human with us. And in between sessions, this is also a applicable tool. It's more than okay not to know where you are at any given moment, although without the desire to locate oneself, you're as good as permanently lost. There's a difference between taking a wrong turn and refusing to look at the map in order to self-correct.
Do we leave out with me? Is it me?
Yes, please.
Okay.
We're almost there.
David White was recorded saying, my wife, who is a very insightful psychiatrist, says, why is it so difficult to claim your own happiness in life? Because if you did claim your happiness in life, then large parts of you would immediately be unemployed and they'd have to go off and be retrained to do something else.
Kind of like our service members needing to,
Yeah.
and any profession that we've just been so on autopilot. Okay. In order for success with the I am identity association model, we need to become more aware of both the active and supporting roles of ourselves. Where are we? Create greater self-relationship. Be the passive observer. Be the engaged motivator within myself, for myself, on my own. Be the willful and the surrender. Another way of speaking to Mara Glatzel's beautiful, or excuse me, yes, Mara Glatzel's, where where we are, she said it in the other eloquent way, so beautiful. Gabor Mate, he wrote The Myth of Normal, such a great book. Read it last year, very big book, hardcover, awesome. The self of, this is yours.
In his book, The Myth of Normal, Mate writes.
That's how I say it.
What?
That's how I say it.
Okay,
like
I don't know.
mate, like the tea from Peru.
Like yerba mate?
Yerba mate, yerba mate, yeah.
In his book, The Myth of Normal, Mate writes, the stress of self-suppression may disturb our physiology, including our immune system.
Doesn't that make sense? If we are not allowing ourselves to emit, we have an inner experience and we're putting it down, putting it down, putting it down. But the immune system might be affected. Duh.
Oh, yeah.
Like, in other words, self-assertion is healing. Being an active participant in our lives, expressing our most real thoughts and feelings, no matter how overly animated it may look to the outside world, is healing and can even be life-saving, as the I Am Identity Association model suggests. In order to express, we become intimately involved with all parts of self, including the parts most readily accepted by people and our existence beyond what people do not have the natural ability to accept about us. We need to self-listen to and respond to ourselves in healthy, self-connected, self-relational ways. Now, that's something we can do all on our own and with a good friend or a great whoever who's there with you.
Being mindful of, being mindful of your identity associations in a self-reflection practice of choice. For me, it's during quiet walks where I can hear myself think. Helps to develop what Mate calls a healthy ego and self.
Ooh, a healthy ego. So these are my interjections to complement his, to wrap up and frame this whole experience to its, which we're at the end, we're getting toward the end, very 3-4 minutes. A healthy ego, not in the sense of superiority, but as in a stable identity, as Mate says. And then I say, for example, in relationship to the identity association model, developing the healthy ego, not in the sense of superiority, but as in a stable identity. So knowing what you are identifying with and how doing so affects you. Stable. What am I identifying with right now? How's this affecting me? It all starts in the wheels turning in our minds. This whole physiological experience, the social experiences that we have. The ground of self-respect, says Mate, to develop a healthy ego. Have the grounds for self-respect. And I give an example of listening to yourself, which happens with self-inquiry and the luxury of being able to have a conversation with yourself. Whether it's journaling or just observing and reflecting on one's thoughts during a walk or a bike ride or whatever. Self-regulation, as Mate says, is a staple of a healthy ego. Knowing how to calm ourselves down. Mate says, for healthy ego, capacity for good decision making. My example, thinking through things. Otherwise, and it's just having the time to think through things, like the identity association model fosters. A healthy ego, Mate says, also requires a working memory. So as I give an example, just to reinforce that, a working memory, taking time to reflect. And then Mate just says, and more. It's a vital asset. So a healthy ego is a vital asset of a thriving human being. And then with those examples, set examples. So learning our relationship with identity associations is a reconnection modality, as I shared earlier. And, Gabor Mate, even himself, defines little t trauma as a disconnection from the self. So we started this by talking about a disconnection from the self and how psychologists recognize worldwide that is oftentimes the grounds for being in distress, for being traumatized is the word we like to use. And he says that this is possible to be disconnected from the self, even in the absence of abuse or overwhelming threat. Want to end this?
Yeah, in The Myth of Normal, Dr. Gordon Newfield is quoted as saying, attachment is the drive for closeness, proximity to others, in not only the physical, but the emotional sense as well. Mate goes on to say, these attachment circuits powerfully override the ones that grant us rationality, objective decision-making, or even conscious will. A fact that explains about our behavior across multiple realms. Oh boy.
Eek,
That
eek, eek. There goes our unconscious, our all humanly shared. We think,
was,
oh, we're gonna get close to this person by doing X,
yeah.
Y, Z. Oh,
Yeah.
soul
Yeah.
programming.
Yeah. Yes,
So,
I've learned a lot about attachment the last year.
oh, which the attached book?
I've read attached, yeah.
I need to
And
reread it.
I read much beyond that as well, but definitely read attached a few times.
Anything that comes to mind that you might share?
I Yeah, I certainly, understanding the styles, understanding the reasons behind how the styles develop has really explained a lot about the way I interact with people.
Mhm.
Mostly in a romantic sense, but
Mhm.
mostly in a romantic sense, but it can certainly bleed into it has bled into other as well, in a professional way as well.
Yeah,
Uh,
totally. No, I mean,
but
with
certainly,
neighbors, I mean, we attachments, like it's saying, like neighbors, everybody gets all
yeah, yeah.
book
So I've
wise.
been learning to break free the last year. So
You what?
I've been trying to move to of course, a secure attachment
Oh,
style.
yeah. I mean, isn't that kind of lifetime work? Because then if we revisit an old cluster that's
Yeah.
totally unrelated to the relationship in at hand or that's being experienced, then it'll change how we act in what was otherwise something we've developed as a stable relationship.
Yeah.
I had that most recent experience, and it's there's only one solution. It was me. I had to become introverted to just, and also to, like, you went to college a week after transitioning from a service, foster new experiences. Que sera, sera, what will be, new experiences, new experiences, new experiences. Because that honors the need to grow the new neural nets, which we need if we're going to live in a different way. And we can only do that if we step outside of our comfort zone. We have given such a wealth of information. Yes, there's like 5 more slides. It's totally unnecessary to read them. I know we're 2 minutes past the 90 that I asked for. So so we can like bookmark and maybe in some capacity revisit any or all of us via a Zoom or any question. Or yeah. Um, your kids have been angels. They've been
I
so,
appreciate that.
they have been amazing. Either they're listening like a fly on the wall.
Oh, no, not at all. No, I mean, it's possible. It's possible. One is up there talking. Like I said, he's working on Minecraft and building his
Oh,
mission, his California mission for his school project with his friends.
yeah.
And my other one is
You take
starting.
turns with me.
Okay, so my military support initiatives. In 2016, I founded my own 501(c)(3) in support of military service members' transition. You want to keep going?
Mhm.
Okay.